Hello, my name is William Burnett, and I'm currently making some videos to help out teachers with Desmos. As you know, the state of Virginia is taking measures to incorporate Desmos calculators in the SOLs, and so I believe that it's going to be helpful if we as teachers start incorporating Desmos in our classroom. That way students can become comfortable with using the online calculator, and also so that it enriches our own curriculum. Now, this first video I'm doing today is on the introduction to Desmos. So if you're not very familiar with Desmos and all you know is, hey, I know it's a website and it's got some calculator tools on it, then we're going to go over the options that we have in Desmos. In fact, our objectives of this video are to go over the types of calculators that are on Desmos, the differences between the online Desmos and the SOL Desmos calculators for Virginia. We're going to talk about creating a Desmos account, what is teacher.desmos, and the basic tools in the graphing calculator on Desmos. And then we're going to use those graphing capabilities to know how to cut, copy, and paste graphs that we make in Desmos into Word documents or Google Docs or really anywhere that you can paste a picture into. And I want to send a thank you to the Virginia Department of Education and Radford University, who have funded these videos, and they're supported by the Secondary Math Professional Development Center at Radford, and this is all part of the Math and Science Partnership Grant Program. So if we go to Desmos.com, we can start seeing that, the big thing that Desmos, I feel like when they were created, was all about graphing calculators, and it's really the main reason why I use it in my class, but there's a whole lot more than graphing calculators. You also have 4-function and scientific calculators down here at the bottom if you scroll down. There's teacher.desmos.com that we'll go to here in a second. And there's also learn.desmos to improve your Desmos skills. So it's more than just your typical graphing calculator that you might have used in your math class before. If you're wondering, what's the difference between the graphing calculator here and the one that the students will see on the test? If you go to desmos.com/testing/Virginia, you'll see exactly the Desmos that your students will get on the test. And so you have the 4-function calculator for grades 4 through 5, scientific for 6 through 8, and the high school graphing calculator is also available. Now there are some differences. If you click on that graphing calculator, it looks a lot the same as we might see on the Desmos graphing calculator when we click on it here. But there are a few differences, and so if you're wanting to know those differences, if you look right here at the PDF, pulling up the PDF, it will actually, if you scroll down, it tells you the differences as far as from the website to the graphing calculator or the other calculators allowed on the SOL test. Now what I suggest you do is kind of use both throughout the school year. I would get the students using Desmos.com, just the regular one, and the differences aren't much, and I feel like that Desmos itself has, using at its full capabilities will enhance the learning. And then of course we have to restrict some of those capabilities when we go to do assessments. So get students used to both, and the more comfortable they'll get with Desmos, the less of a hassle and the less of a worry this will be when they go to take their assessments at the end of the year. So going back to Desmos.com, we have the 4-function calculator, and it's your basic 4-function calculator. We also have the scientific, and it's your basic scientific calculator. What most questions stem from on using Desmos are in the graphing section. So let's take a look at the graphing tools that we have available. Before you do any work in Desmos, I recommend creating an account, or if you already have an account, sign in. And there's a lot of different reasons why it's good to have an account with Desmos, and the main one is you can save all the graphs that you've made before. So as you get into this and you see how many options are available, you're going to start creating things for your class, and you don't have to recreate it every year. So you can create graphs, you can share them, and I'll show you how to do that. And there's also interactives you can do with your classroom where you'll want students to log in and you'll want to be able to see what they're doing, and it just creating an account is one of the things that I would definitely do. So I've already got one created. I'm going to sign in with my Google account. And you can see once I've logged in over here, my name appears. And if you click on that, you can see your email. You can change your account settings, which is mainly just changing your email and your password, or you can sign out if you feel like you need to sign out. Now, to jump right into things and start graphing, you can really just go over to this entry bar and type in any equation that you want. I'm going to put in a linear equation, 3x plus 4. Notice I don't have y equals or the f of x equals or anything like that, and Desmos is able to pick up on what I'm wanting to do and graph the line for me. Now, I typically like to show my students this written in as an equation. Sometimes when I'm teaching and I just want to throw a graph up quickly on the projector, I'll just go over here and just type in whatever I want to type in. But I like showing my students, what is this equals? And so I would suggest teaching them to say y equals this, or even better, using functional notation. Because as you use Desmos, we're going to want to start graphing more than one thing at a time. Suppose we were comparing slopes, and I want to see, what if I change that 3 to a 1/3? Then I can label this the g of x, and then do 1/3. And for Desmos, all you do is type in 1/3. It automatically does 1/3. I'm going to arrow over and type in x plus 4. So I keep everything the same. I'm just taking the reciprocal of that slope. And we can see and compare slopes between the blue and the red line there. Now, Desmos will graph other things. It will graph quadratics. It'll graph polynomials. It'll graph circles, ellipses, just about anything that we would need to graph in our class, it will graph it. And so we can even see if we want to do a circle, we can. And all I'm doing is putting those in parentheses. I use that caret key, that shift 6, to get into the exponent form there. And then I arrow out of that. And see, I forgot to put my parentheses here, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. It tries to guess where the parentheses are if I use a closed parenthesis here, and it didn't guess correctly for me, so I'm just going to go back and correct that. And then let's let it equal, 4. And so there's our circle. So we can graph many things at once, and just to kind of talk about the tools here, not so much the graphs and how we'd use them in class just yet. But I can change the color of any function that I want to, or any equation that I want to, just by going over to where this color symbol is and holding down on the left click button on the mouse, and it will give me several options here to change the color of the graph. I don't want them both blue, I'll make one orange. I can also change the style. This is a solid line. I can change it to a dashed line. I can change it to just a dotted line if I want to. And so that's going to be real helpful with distinguishing which function is being affected as I manipulate the variables in the equations. So let me change that back to solid. You can also, as you see there, turn on and off the graph. So if I'm like, this is too much, just where's that circle? Just go over there and click on those circles right here, these on the left, and it will remove the function temporarily from being graphed. And I can turn them back on anytime just by clicking on them. You can graph points. So if I want to graph the center of the circle, I just plot the point. Let's see, it's at -3, 1. And there's my center. You can label it by clicking on label. And you can either, you call it circle P if you want to, or you can say the center. And you can even say, hey, this is center HK. So there's lots of different ways that you can label it. You can label it with just the point that it is, -3, 1. As we look at any function's graph, we can click on the line and trace it out, so you can see different points that are on that circle, including specific points that we might want to know, like the intercepts. And you can use this when you're talking about the intersection. You can trace it and find out where the intersections are. So that's just, I know that you can look at this and say, well, there's a lot of tools already that I can just use with my students, and you could stop here with just being able to graph things and they check it, but there's a lot more you can do with Desmos than just your, let's just see what the graph looks like. And so I want to go over those as well with you throughout this course. Some other things that we can do, you can close out, let's say I just don't like the 3x plus 4, I don't even want to see it anymore. You can delete it just by hitting that X right there. And I'm going to do that with some of this to kind of narrow this down to just one function, you can retitle your graph. So I'm going to title Introduction to Desmos. And so now it's saved. Because I've logged in, it's going to be now in my files for future graphs if I want to do this again, say at several different faculty meetings. Over here on this edit list, I can click on that. I can change the function I have right here to a table. So I can see it as a table with inputs and outputs. You can graph this with a line, or you can graph it mainly like the same options we have. We can change it to a line, so it graphs a line through several points. The colors, you can have the points show up as holes on the graph or whatever. So there's a lot of, or X's, there's a lot of different options for your table and graphing your table. You can duplicate a function. So if I've got a really complicated function and I don't want to have to keep typing out, I just want to change a few variables, I can hit duplicate and then change the variables as I see fit. One of the more helpful things I've got with Desmos here is, instead of saying the slope is 1/3, I can change the slope to be a variable like A. And as soon as I type in A, notice it gives me the option to add a slider. So I say, yeah, I want to add a slider. And now I can change A just by sliding this. And students can see the relationship that slope has with a line. Now this current slider goes from -10 to +10. We can change that by clicking on the number right there and say I want to go to 100. I could do that and start at 0. I can also set that up, and really my slider can be just about anything I want. Now this does not include negative numbers because I made it go from 0 to 100. You can say, you know what, it's showing 15.4 right there for a slope. I only want it to be whole numbers, so I can make the step 1, and it will only count by ones as I use the slider here. Or I can make it count by even numbers, which, as you see the other videos that I go through subjects, different ways you can use Desmos in Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, there will be sometimes a need to change the slider around to whatever you're doing in the class. Over here we also have an undo button, so we can undo things, and this is mainly just undoing things I've just showed you. And that's typical in any program. You see the undo or the redo button, and so for quick backing up or going forward, you can use those two tools. The 3-line bar right here allows me to look at my current graph, which is Introduction to Desmos, and I can save that into my saved graphs. So you can see different things I've saved throughout my classes. You can go even further down, and Desmos, this is probably what you have if you just created an account, Desmos has already examples set up for you, which the nice thing about this is, let's actually close out of this and pull up a graph. So here's parabolas in standard form. And so you don't really have to come up with all this code. It's already done for you. Notice we can shade in Desmos, which is nice. And you can drag these sliders to however you want them. And so there's a lot of already pre-made stuff for you in Desmos that we can use in our classroom. And so I can go through and I can even change. Let's suppose I want to make this, I don't know, for some reason x cubed. I can go through and change that. And of course that's going to change it to a cubic function. But then I can save it. You know, if I felt like that was better, I can rename the graph and save it into my own folder. So you don't have to start from scratch on all these things. Desmos has a lot of pre-planned stuff out for you, already done, and you can just build off of what's already there. Not only does Desmos set up these things, but a lot of their users will come up with some creative stuff that you can use in your own classroom and build off their work and then save it into your own folder to help out your teaching in your own classroom. So let's go back to our introduction to Desmos graph, and since I saved it 6 minutes ago, I can now go back and open that graph up. And it's exactly where I left it off whenever I last saved it. And sometimes I share graphs with students and let them explore what I've already set up for them. and I might want to leave them some instructions. So if you go over to this plus symbol, there's add an item, and there's another way we can enter a table right there. There's a note, and that's where I'm going to start off with. So I might want them to, I don't know, change 1/3 to a slider, or we say change the slope to a slider, and label it A. And so now if I save it, when the students get this, they're going to get the note right here. And as they work this, they say, okay, there's my slope 1/3, change it to a slider, and let that be A. And there they've completed the instructions. So that's one of the things you can do. You can use notes to give instructions. You can use it to, if you know you're going to share the graph with lots of people, and there's a lot of equations down below, and you kind of need to explain what you did and what variables they should manipulate. All that can be explained in a note on the left. So it has nothing to do with really producing the graph, but it does give other users an idea of what you were meaning with the code over here on the left. Other things you can add an image. So let's do that. If you go down, click on the plus symbol and add image. I've got, let's see, on my desktop I've got an image, let's see, of a roller coaster I saved earlier. I can open that up, and so this is pretty cool. I can drag that image in behind the graph, and I can also change where the center of that image is. So if I want to move it around, let's say I want to move it above the x-axis, I can just by changing my y value here. Let's see, the center at 4, and that will take it up above, and then students can maybe have instructions for them to adjust the slope so that it lines up with that roller coaster there. And so whatever you got there, you can change that, change it around. Let's see, there's options here for how dark you want the image to be. So right now it's kind of hard to see the grid line, so we can lighten it up some. And I might even change the color of that line to red so it shows up a little bit better on that blue sky. A lot of different possibilities you can do here. On the right side we have several things. We got a zoom in and zoom out. So if we want to zoom in, click on that plus symbol over here on the right. You can zoom in and see the graphs a little bit better. You can zoom out. Sometimes when you're doing this though, you're like lost. You have no clue of where you are on this graph, or you just want to get back to the default screen view. If you click on the home key, that will do that. And then as soon as I click and drag to move around on the graph, the home key shows back up when I'm not on the home view. Over here at the wrench bar, you got graph settings, so we can change this to polar if we wanted to. We can change whether or not we show the numbers on the x and y axis. We can, take off those minor lines if those are too many lines for you to look at. You can take off the x-axis, take off the y-axis. You can take off the grid if you want to. So there's a lot of different options here that you can set up. I'm going to actually clear out this screen. And clearing out the screen and then typing in the sine of x, I've got a trig function graph now. Now notice that once again, if you don't see this over here on your right, I'm going to graph settings and I can see the graph settings here. It's set up in radians already. I'm at Desmos.com. This is the default on Desmos, it's radians. If you go to the Virginia one for SOLs, notice this is Desmos testing Virginia graphing. If we typed in that same function, the f of x equals the sine of x, notice it doesn't really properly graph it, and the reason why is the default on the SOL test for Desmos is in degrees. So if for some reason a student, I don't see it on any of the SOL tests they take, but if for some reason they are, it's going to already be in degrees, and they would have to switch to radians to see it graphed properly. Now, switching back to Desmos website here, I don't like how our graph is being graphed on an x-axis that's being labeled as 2, 1. It's all integers. I want it to show up in, like we typically see in a trig class, where it's going from negative 2 pi to 2 pi or so forth. So right now it's still counting by the default by ones, and I'm just going to go over to where it says step on the x-axis, and I'm going to change that to pi. So just type in pi and that will give it a pi. And now notice how my x-axis labels have changed. or the numbers on them have changed to show it in terms of pi. And if I zoom in, it allows me to see how pi has been broken up into even more fractions of pi there. And you can keep zooming in as much as you want and get as detailed as you want there. You can also, like the other graphs, click on it and trace these graphs. It keeps it as integers, but when you get to the special points, usually at max and min, it might tell you if you land on it exactly, hey, that's pi over 2 comma 1 right there. And so that's just a little bit about graphing trig functions and how we can use these settings over here. We'll get more into detail with these things as we look at the subject-specific uses of Desmos. Now, if there's a graph that I just absolutely love and I want to share it, there's a lot of options that you can use on Desmos to share your graph. You can copy and paste the link, you can print it out, you can export it, or you can embed it. So many different options there, and you can explore those if you want to. My favorite is to use the snipping tool. So if you're running a Windows, you can go to the search bar and type in snipping tool, and you'll get something that looks like this. And from there you can just create a new one, and you can drag that section of the graph you want. And it's just like copying and pasting a picture. And so it's already copied to my clipboard. I can open up something like Word, and I can paste into that by right-clicking and just clicking on Paste. And then now I have it in Word, and I can treat it treats just like a picture. You can put it behind text if you want, or in front of text, and then drag it around. You can type in equations or ask questions, print it out, and save that graph into the Word document if you want to. So I find that very handy. I use it a lot of times when I'm making up assessments where I want specific graphs. I can label points on the graph using the tools in Desmos and then screenshot it, and I can really restrict what area of the graph the students are viewing. Now there are a few other tools we haven't talked about on Desmos, the graphing portion of it. There's this one down in the lower left that says Show Keypad, and there are options in here that we've seen and we've already used without actually clicking on this. I find it easier, instead of saying a squared, to type in a and then shift 6, which is the caret key, and then type in my exponential form. But sometimes people like to see this right here. They can see the calculator. They can click on functions, and notice there's a lot more options here. I like to just type in sine. I find it faster and easier to do that, but if you're looking for trig, it's all different types of trig stuff it can do, and you can click on it to put it over here into your input bar. There's also stats, stuff for stats that we'll talk about later, and miscellaneous stuff. A lot of times my students can't find the cubic root. How do we do a cubic root? That's the common one that we'll go to here. Most of this other stuff you can type in and it works, but we can see if you just don't know how to type it in, like square root, where's the square root? You can go over here and use the square root down here. That's that symbol if you need to. So don't forget the keyboard's always down there in the bottom left-hand corner for you to use if you need to use it. Now, a few other things I want to discuss with you outside of the graphing capabilities of Desmos are some other things they've got set up for you. They have teacher.desmos.com, and they've got learn.desmos.com. Learn is a great place to go and learn more about Desmos. So you can click on any of these. They have videos, they have activities for you to do. So beyond what I do as far as videos, you can see what Desmos has set up for you, and the geometry tool is a great one. And I'll go through some of those as we look at the videos. Teacher.desmos.com is great for classroom activities. And so if you click on that, there's a ton of activities already built into Desmos, and they go through all different types of subjects. I would suggest you spend some time going through this and just seeing what all they have to offer. I've used a few things in my own class. You can bookmark them over here. This is one I've bookmarked, landing the plane. I can probably, let's see here, I can go through and pull up some old activities I've done before. Just by clicking on history, custom, the ones I've liked and I've bookmarked come up right here. And they're not all the same. There are different types of activities. There's some, my favorites, the polygraphs. There's ones with marbles and different types of games they have or activities. And I'm going to take you through those as we go through subject by subject. I'm going to say, hey, here's a good activity to use. But beyond me doing it for you, I would suggest going through, because there's always new stuff being added. You can create your own if you want to. And so let's look at just the one right here on symmetry. They give you the student view of what students will see. So this is a sample exercise right here that the student would see. Each of these graphs is symmetric. The red graphs have one kind of symmetry, the blue have another kind. Describe the differences you see between red and blue. And so the student types in their answers there. So it's a great way to go through and ask students different things on Desmos. Now, will this be on the SOL? Absolutely not. It's not going to be anything on the SOL. But like I said, these videos are to help you integrate Desmos into your classroom. So that way students can learn more about the math you teach, and they also become comfortable with using Desmos on the SOL test. So we'll see more of these Desmos activities as we go through subject-specific ways to use Desmos. The whole purpose of this video, though, was to give you an introduction, and I would take some time and play around with the things I've shown you today. There are way more things you can do with Desmos, and I'm sure we'll get into specific graphs and functions as we hit the different subjects. But like I said, I just want you to be a little more comfortable with Desmos and start to use it on your own and some of the ways that I use it. So hopefully this was helpful to you, and thanks for watching.